Welcome. It is Mitch. I am on YouTube. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. Trying to build this thing from nothing to something. Numbers climbing a little bit. We're trying to keep the momentum moving forward, just like the Green Bay Packers. Going to Nashville, curb stomp the Tennessee Titans 30-14. Can we call that a curb stomping? We can call it a shellacking. We can call it, I don't know if we'd call it a beatdown. I don't know. I don't know how those three range in order from sounding the most dominant 1, 2, and 3. But Green Bay took care of business. How about that? 30-14 win over Tennessee, moved to 2-1 of the season. Now get ready for a big one on Sunday. 3-0 Sam Darnold, Minnesota Vikings come to town. Oh, it hurts to say it. The 3-0 Sam Darnold-led Minnesota Vikings coming to Lambeau Field. Hopefully Green Bay turns that goose egg in the loss column for the Vikings into a 1. And that is my index finger. Packer snap counts. You already saw the title of the video. We're not burying the lead today. Looking back, we've done it the last couple of Tuesdays, doing it again today. What stood out in the snap count totals for Green Bay in that win over the Tennessee Titans? We're starting on the edge. We're starting on that defensive edge for Jeff Hafley's defense for the Green Bay Packers. It's true depth. The snap count totals reflect that. Try saying that 5 times fast. Rashawn Gary on Sunday was out there, 37 of 54 defensive snaps. Preston Smith was out there for 33 of 54. Lucas Van Ness, 22 of 54. Kingsley Enagbari, also 22 of 54. If you want to break it down from a percentage perspective, Rashawn was out there for 69% of the snaps. Preston, 61%. LVN and Kingsley Enagbari were both out there for 41% of the snaps. I think what's so fascinating about this for Green Bay and the defense is it is not forced depth. A lot of times, whether it's baseball, basketball, football, teams will dive in and force depth out of necessity, out of scheme, due to injuries. A lot of times you see teams having to go down that well. For Green Bay, it's not forced. It's present. It's real. It's genuine depth. A lot of you want to see Rashawn Gary out there from the rip. You want to see him out there early. You want to see him out there often for as many snaps as possible. I look at this scenario they have right now, and if there is such thing as a four-headed monster, it is emerging at that defensive end spot for Green Bay. You have the head honchos. You have Rashawn Gary, Preston Smith. And then you have Kingsley Enagbari and Lucas Van Ness. And as I've watched Kingsley Enagbari the last couple of weeks, I'm sitting back thinking, man, this dude would start for a lot of teams in the NFL. I think Kingsley Enagbari would start for a lot of teams in the NFL. There's frustration among Packer fans with Rashawn Gary. I get it. I would say it's still, way too early. Those talks are premature. I know we want to see more out of Rashawn Gary. I would caution Packer fans on this. Were your expectations for Rashawn entering this year that he would be in the same class as a TJ Watt and as a Myles Garrett? Because if that was the case, I can't blame you for it, but yes, then you've probably been woefully disappointed by the production so far from Rashawn Gary. But if you can just give it time, we know he's a good player. I think he's been in the league long enough to prove that he's a solid contributor. We just want to see the consistency. I feel like I use that word with quite a few players on this roster, and it can be used across sports, obviously, for teams, coaches, players, you name it. We want to see that consistency from Rashawn Gary and just haven't seen it. He had a sack wiped out on Sunday due to a penalty in that win against Tennessee. We saw their guys feast left and right, including on that edge with Preston Smith, LVN, and Enagbari. Just hasn't been the right moment. I thought Sunday was a perfect propped-up opportunity for Rashawn Gary to get into that sack column and chalk up a couple against a Tennessee offensive line that's been pitiful. That has been, at times, disturbing to watch this year. That Tennessee Titans offensive line. Was Will Levis good on Sunday? God, no. Oh, my gosh, Will Levis was not good. Did he have a lot of help around him as it pertains to pass protection? Sure didn't. Titans benched their right tackle, Nicholas Petit-Frere, at one point in that game. They just looked at the right tackle. They said, he's not cutting it. Brought in the backup. He got cooked too. So Will Levis didn't have a lot of help. It was one of those games you circled and you said, man, this Tennessee offensive line has been terrible. If Green Bay doesn't eat this week, then we start putting some question marks around that defensive line especially. But they feasted. And I know there's still questions about Rashawn and people are growing frustrated with the former first-round pick out of Michigan. I would preach patience. And I know it's hard to do that to a fan base, of any fan base, to preach patience. I think winning helps a lot. If Green Bay were 1-2, heaven forbid 0-3, I think then we really start looking at some of these glaring issues that might be more prevalent. It's just not a thing right now for Green Bay. They're 2-1, sitting pretty, getting ready to welcome in the 3-0 Vikings. And I just love that it's true depth and it's not forced by Hafley with these defensive ends. And you know what I like about it most too is it keeps these guys fresh. It does. You got a nice rotation going. I think you can find a rhythm when you have LVN and Kingsley and Egbari playing 41% of the snaps each compared to 69% and 61% for Preston Smith. These guys can find a rhythm. They can figure it out, and they have, I think, especially in that win over the Tennessee Titans. Per PFF, and I know Pro Football Focus is not the be-all, end-all when it comes to the grading system, but I'm just looking at pressures and sacks. Preston Smith had 4 quarterback pressures and 2 sacks on Sunday. Kingsley and Egbari had 3 pressures, 1.5 quarterback sacks, and a forced fumble. Rashawn Gary had 3 quarterback pressures, no sacks. LVN had 1 pressure, 1 sack. This is a great problem to have if you're Jeff Hafley. Just trying to plug and play and figure out what spots you want these guys in. And this is what makes it so refreshing is this is, I go back to it, it's not forced. This isn't a spot where I don't think there's a single, not one Packer fan who when they see LVN come in or Egbari come in, they're like, oh, the second tier guys are in. Yeah, don't expect anything here. Don't expect any disruption up front on this play. It's been far from that. It's, LVN and Egbari are in. Buckle up if you're the opposing offensive line because these guys are causing havoc too. They've been game wreckers too. You see Kingsley's strip sack yesterday. You see who dove on it? LVN. Nice little tag team play there for the two. Kingsley goes in, hammers Will Levis, strips the ball. LVN dives on it. Love it. Absolutely love it. And it's true depth for Jeff Hafley with that group of defensive ends. Also, said we weren't going to bury the lead. That's why we started on the edge. There was nothing snap count-wise that stood out from the defensive line, but I would be remiss if I didn't bring this up. And I'm so... You guys watching Devontae Wyatt? Are you watching Devontae Wyatt? Are you watching the former first-round pick out of Georgia, Devontae Wyatt? You talk about a guy who's eating early on in the season, feasting early on in the season, coming into his own in the early part of the season. I love what I'm seeing from Devontae Wyatt. 3 quarterback pressures, 3 quarterback hits, 2 sacks, had a fumble recovery and a sack week 1 against Philadelphia. Had you told me out of the 2, because we've been waiting, Devontae Wyatt was in that same draft class, first-round picks. Green Bay had 2. 2 Georgia defensive players taken. Quay Walker at linebacker, Devontae Wyatt up front on the defensive line. Had you told me entering this year, hey, one of these guys is really, really going to become a game breaker, I would have gone with Quay Walker. And this is not a spot where I'm trying to rain on the parade of Quay Walker. He hasn't really stepped up. Hasn't really pinballed around the field under control like I thought he would be. Time will tell how that turns out. Devontae Wyatt's been so freaking good. And underrated, very underrated. Those big boys on the interior of the defensive line a lot of time don't get a lot of love. And when I was looking at the snap count totals, I was like, man, there isn't a whole hell of a lot that, there isn't really anything that stands out. And it's like, oh, this is interesting with the snap count totals. But I had to bring up Devontae Wyatt. 3 quarterback hits, 2 sacks. Count me in. Count me in. There are options on this defense, legitimate options. There are playmakers on this defense, legitimate playmakers. We're now seeing these guys be put in positions to succeed. It's coming to the light. Thank you, Jeff Hafley. Let's hope it continues. Real test on Sunday. Colts offense, kind of all over the map. Got them in week 2. Defense looked great for Green Bay. Tennessee, you knew Will Levis was going to give you at least one. Jair has the pick 6. He gave you another one late, a pick by Xavier McKinney. Strip sack, you recover a fumble. There's 3 turnovers. You win the turnover differential by 3, you're winning most games. Tennessee's offense, though, so far nothing to write home about. Big test this weekend. I'm so excited to see how Jeff Hafley's group looks against a Minnesota offense that's been burning and turning so far. Mitch, I am on YouTube. Please subscribe if you haven't already. We're going over snap count totals. I saw some people talking about this on Twitter. I didn't make much of it, but I thought it was noteworthy to bring it up. Running back, snap count totals. Josh Jacobs was out there for 33 of a possible 63 snaps. Emanuel Wilson, 26 of 63. Percentage-wise, the breakdown goes 53% Josh Jacobs, 41% Emanuel Wilson. 3 things here. 3, count them, 1, 2, 3. I'm not stunned how close this was after the workload for Josh Jacobs last week. Josh Jacobs was the definition of a bell cow, 32 carries in that Week 2 win over the Indianapolis Colts. One of the best games, arguably, of his NFL career. Going back to his days with the Raiders, now his first season with Green Bay. In the short term, I was able to really laser focus in and say, man, if they have to do this again and give Josh Jacobs 30 carries against Tennessee to win, I'm fine with it. I'm not fine with him getting 30 carries every week because that's just not, running backs aren't going to be able to sustain that over the course of a 17-game season. But I said in the short term, knowing that in the back of our minds, Jordan Love's coming back at some point, so you won't have to give it to Josh Jacobs 30 times a game. I was fine if they had to go back towards that direction against Tennessee, although I didn't think it would work against a pretty stout Tennessee front. And the snap count total ended up being almost even, 33-26 between Jacobs and Emanuel Wilson. So I saw a lot of people in Packerland discussing, why was this? Why was Wilson was out there a lot? Reason one, I'm not stunned because of the workload from Josh Jacobs last week. At some point, the guy's going to need a little bit of a breather, a little bit of a break, and there is a carryover factor, especially, you're a running back. Every time you touch the ball, you're getting hit, right? It's not like a wide receiver where you can run routes, and a lot of the time you're not getting targeted or throwing the ball, and sometimes you catch it and you can dance out of bounds. Running backs are getting hit almost every play. And, so the wear and tear, it builds up a lot quicker. And so I wasn't surprised to see Emanuel Wilson in there more. That's point number one. Point number two, I said this in the instant reaction. Emanuel Wilson's a good running back. Like, he's just a damn good running back, right? Like, I think he's proven his worth. We were seeing glimpses of it even last year when there were injuries, and then he himself got injured in that game against the Chargers last season, and we didn't hear much from Emanuel Wilson the rest of the way. Missed some valuable time by the time he was healthy. Green Bay had a structured place in there at running back that basically revolved around feeding it to Aaron Jones down the stretch as many times as possible. But Emanuel Wilson's he's just a good back. I told you guys, I was texting my buddies and I was like, man, Emanuel Wilson, confirmed, good running back, great find. My buddy's like, correct, yes. So that's point number two. Point number three, you got to remember, this is Matt LaFleur. Matt LaFleur loves using two running backs. That's been the bread and butter. That's been the order of operations since he took over in Green Bay. Gone are the days largely in the NFL where there is one running back as the headliner getting, 25, 30 touches a game. Christian McCaffrey is a rare breed now. The Tennessee Titan Derrick Henry days are a rare breed now. We're seeing a lot of two-back teams that like a rotation, and Matt LaFleur is no stranger to that. The Aaron Jones, Jamal Williams days, I think those guys were both in the same draft class, out of UTEP and BYU, respectively. And then it was Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon. And now it's Josh Jacobs. I think it was supposed to be Marshawn Lloyd, but he's on IR. And it's Josh Jacobs and Emanuel Wilson. And Emanuel Wilson, hey, buddy, here's a plate of opportunity. What are you going to do with it? Take advantage of it. And that's exactly what he's done. First NFL touchdown on Sunday for Emanuel Wilson. Tip of the cap to him for that. Let's bring up point 4. I said 3 points. Fourth point. What are the Packers going to do when Marshawn Lloyd's back? Spent a high draft pick on him. I know he's only a rookie. There's plenty of time to figure that out. But in the short term, present, the right now, when Marshawn Lloyd gets back from IR, if Emanuel Wilson's still doing what he's doing now, and quite frankly, I don't know why it would change. He just seems like a solid back. What do you do with Marshawn Lloyd? You spent a pretty decent pick on him out of USC. Do you just bite the bullet for this year and say, hey, you know what? We're going to run with Josh Jacobs and Wilson, and Lloyd, you'll fit into the picture better next season? And do you kind of kick the can down the road until a later date? Obviously, if an injury pops up with Jacobs or Emanuel Wilson, it changes the complexion of all this. But again, a good problem to have if you're Matt LaFleur, like Hafley with those defensive ends, trying to figure out how to share the wealth appropriately. LaFleur's going through that, but he's got more experience with it because he likes using two running backs. But three, if Lloyd turns out to be a nice little hidden gem too, I don't even know if it'd be a hidden gem. Was he a third round pick for Green Bay? So we'll see. But running back, I mean, Emanuel Wilson was out there for 41% of the snaps. Jacobs 53%. Emanuel Wilson was running the ball really well. Had that 30-yard touchdown reception on a screen pass. And look at that game. When Green Bay got up 2 possessions, when they got up, 27-14, did you really feel like Tennessee's offense was going to strike enough fear into Green Bay where they felt like they had to do something offensively? Green Bay buttoned it up and got really conservative about midway through the third quarter through the rest of the game because they knew the Titans offense wasn't going to be able to string together back-to-back scoring drives. And so that probably planted the seed in LaFleur's mind. Like, I can give Josh Jacobs more of a little break here. Start feeding Emanuel Wilson. That's what they did. I loved it. I had no problems with it. Mitch, I am on YouTube. Please subscribe. Going over Packers snap counts, week 3 win against the Tennessee Titans. Linebacker is always fascinating to me because I'm a big Edger and Cooper guy. Second round pick out of Texas A&M, dealt with some injuries in the offseason, so they kind of had to wait to bring him along as he dealt with those throughout training camp and the preseason. I just like looking at his totals week in and week out, and I wanted to bring up a larger point today as we get ready to buckle down and wrap things up here. Quay Walker was out there for 100% of the snaps, 54 out of 54. Isaiah McDuffie was out there for 42 of 54, good for 78%. Eric Wilson was out there for 8, which was his number last week, just 15%. Edger and Cooper, 18 of 54, out there for 33% of the snaps. Defensively, he was in there on a sack for Green Bay in that second half. Here's the point I wanted to bring up. Edger and Cooper, it appears, is taking some of the snaps away from Isaiah McDuffie. Can he be considered a vet now? Linebacker out of Boston College. How many years is 4 or 5 years has it been for McDuffie already? But Edger and Cooper, regardless, the rookie is taking some of the snaps from McDuffie. Quay's out there for 100% of the snaps week 3 against Tennessee. I'm wondering if Edger and Cooper should start dipping into Quay Walker's totals. Another sort of performance from Quay Walker on Sunday. I think, or I believe, strongly believe, the one thing Quay Walker has going heavily in his favor is a strong vote of confidence from Jeff Hafley, who just said last week at a press conference when he was asked about Quay Walker, and I quote, "I love where Quay's at." This is Jeff Hafley again talking about Quay Walker just last week. "I love where Quay's at, and not where Quay could be, where Quay is going to be." That's a strong vote of confidence. After what's been kind of a rocky start for Quay Walker, again, I go back to that word consistency. Just haven't seen it from him. We've seen it from his draft mate, the other first-round pick, Devontae Wyatt. That dude's popping up at least once, twice a week, which is awesome for an interior defensive lineman. Quay, we just haven't seen it at linebacker. Sometimes it just looks like, is it statuesque word? He kind of just looks stiff out there at linebacker, almost like robotic. Like, is there too much going on up here that he's trying to process and funnel information that it's resulting to slower reaction times on the field with Quay? I'm asking the question. I don't know. But sometimes it almost looks robotic out there for him. And for a dude who we saw at Georgia flying around, who's supremely athletic, supremely talented, we just haven't seen it too much in Green Bay. And I think there's still potential to unlock that, especially with Hafley taking over the controls as the defensive coordinator. But for the time being, I think it's a fair question to ask. Man, with Edger and Cooper really kind of flashing in spots, instead of taking away snaps from McDuffie, who I love what I'm seeing from Isaiah McDuffie. It's just, I'm not worried about him out on the field. And I'm not worried about Quay, but there are those moments where he has lapses and you're like, damn. Damn it. And I don't see too many of those from McDuffie when he's tackling in the open field, right? When he's reading and reacting out there, when he's handling his assignments. And so I wonder if, Quay Walker, instead of 100% of the snaps week in and week out, is there a chance that dips to even, 90, 92 and Edger and Cooper's out there for, let's say, 24 snaps this past week instead of 18? I don't know. I don't know what they're thinking, but a big vote of confidence for Quay Walker from Jeff Hafley just last week. But it just doesn't, with Quay, it just doesn't seem like it's all coming together for whatever reason when we can see the talent and the athleticism. And I thought McDuffie stood out way more than Quay Walker did Sunday against Tennessee, especially when I went back and watched the game. And Cooper, he pops. Limited snaps, just 18 of 54, but he pops when he's on film. He really does. A couple extra notes. Bo Melton was out there for 17 snaps. I don't know what it was like. I think it said it was 90 degrees in Nashville, felt like 96. I actually know a couple people who made the trip there. Shout out Keith and Connor, who were there. So I think it was a hot, humid day, I think. So maybe giving some of the wide receivers an extra, breather on the bench. But Bo Melton was out there for 17 snaps. I didn't he wasn't targeted, I don't think, or anything, so I didn't really realize it until I looked, and I thought so. I was like, oh, Bo Melton gets him running, and versatile, fast wide receiver. Evan Williams, 20 snaps. All right, let me do it this way. 0 snaps week 1 for the rookie safety out of Oregon. 0 snaps week 1 against Philadelphia. 2 in week 2 against, 20 week 2 against Indianapolis. Just 4 against the Tennessee Titans. So I don't know if this is a strictly matchup thing. It could be. Or if we're just going to be riding a roller coaster with the rookie out of Oregon. But 0 snaps week 1, 20 week 2, 4. Week 3 against Tennessee, Javon Bullard, the other rookie out of Georgia, was out there for a lot of the snaps next to the X-Man, those two holding down the safety spots. And then I was curious to see Jordan Morgan, first-round pick out of Arizona. He was sort of in a rotation at right guard with Sean Ryan. I was interested to see if they would feature Jacob Monk, the rookie out of Duke, at all. All 5 offensive linemen played 100% of the snaps. Big boys up front paving some holes on the outside, on some of those zone runs. Not so much up the middle. That's a good interior for Tennessee's defense, but holding up in pass protection very, very well, keeping a clean pocket for Malik Willis. There was no rotation at right guard with Jordan Morgan out. Sean Ryan out there for 100% of the snaps. That'll do it for this edition of Packer Snap Counts. Again, please subscribe to the channel. Mitch, I am on YouTube. We'll see you next time.